Have you ever, like, found an old journal and you read this really profound thought in your own handwriting, but you have absolutely zero memory of being the person who actually wrote it?
Oh, yeah. It is a deeply unsettling feeling.
Right. It is honestly like receiving a transmission from a ghost who just happens to share your signature.
That is a very good way of putting it.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a truly stunning piece of literature, a short story called Off the Skies.
It's such a beautifully written piece.
It really is. We are going to explore this beautifully universal and sometimes really painful experience of touching a moment of profound inspiration, suddenly losing it, and then figuring out how to navigate the ordinary world afterward.
And it is a remarkable narrative to dissect because, it takes something we usually treat as totally abstract, like spiritual inspiration, or what we often call flow state.
Yeah, exactly.
And it treats it with this rigorous, almost clinical detail. So the story centers on a protagonist named Dara, and the scene opens on the very first warm day of April. Dara pulls her winter coat out of the closet, and right there in the pocket, she finds a small, filled green notebook.
Just sitting there waiting for her.
Exactly. She holds it up to the light, and the text describes her looking at it, quote, like a creature she half remembered owning.
I love that line. And what she finds inside that notebook is what really kicks off this incredible cognitive dissonance for her.
Oh, entirely.
She opens it and she reads these sentences in her own handwriting.
Hmm.
Things like, the train window is a kind of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I heard the color yellow today.
That one always gets me.
Yeah. And finally, everything is trying to tell me something, and I am finally fluent. I mean, if I found those sentences in my own handwriting, I would honestly have to just sit down on the floor.
Which is actually the exact physical reaction Dara has. She sits right down in her hallway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's looking at undeniable proof of her own internal life. But the mind that inhabited that exact moment it's completely inaccessible to her now.
Because it's been so long.
Right. She recognizes the penmanship, obviously, but she does not recognize the person.
Wait, I am struggling with the premise of how she got to that state in the first place, though.
Mm.
The story reveals that these notes were written 8 months prior.
Yes. During a 6 to 7 week window, she privately called the skies period.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because usually, when we think of a spiritual awakening or this massive burst of inspiration, we picture someone on a mountaintop.
Right.
Or like coming back from a month-long silent meditation retreat. But you're telling me her catalyst was just being unemployed and miserable. How does that math work?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but the mechanism behind it is actually deeply rooted in how human psychology processes liminal spaces.
Liminal spaces,
And-
like transitional period.
Exactly. Those awkward, uncomfortable, transitional periods of life. The text is incredibly specific that this state was not triggered by peace. It was triggered by the friction of being between jobs. See, when we are employed, or when our lives are highly structured, our brains basically run on autopilot. In neuroscience, there is this concept called the default mode network.
Right, the background processing.
Yes. It is the part of the brain that hums along when we are doing routine tasks. It keeps us focused on our to-do lists, our social standing, our immediate daily stressors.
So it's the brain's energy-saving mode, essentially. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't need to be hyper-aware of the intricate beauty of a tree when you're just trying to commute to the office on a Tuesday.
Precisely. You'd never get anything done. So unemployment stripped away Dara's routine. It effectively broke her default mode network.
Because there's no routine to fall back on.
Right. Suddenly, the autopilot is completely disengaged. The sheer friction and discomfort of that unstructured time forces the brain into a state of hypervigilance.
Which usually just feels terrible.
Oh, usually, yes.
Yeah.
Usually that hypervigilance manifests as pure anxiety, but occasionally, if the conditions are just right, that intense awareness gets channeled outward. It turns into this profound, mindful presence. The story calls it a quality of attention.
So the world didn't actually change, her filter did. It's like those Magic Eye posters from the 90s. You know what I mean?
Oh, I remember those, yeah.
You stare at this chaotic wall of static, getting increasingly frustrated. But what you are actually doing when you stare at a Magic Eye poster is intentionally disabling your brain's normal depth perception.
That is a great analogy.
Yeah, you are forcing your ocular muscles to stop focusing on the surface of the paper. And the moment you disable that default perception, a three-dimensional spaceship suddenly pops out of the static.
And the poster itself didn't change at all.
Right, the poster didn't change. Dara's unemployment basically disabled her brain's normal depth perception of daily stress, allowing this hidden dimension of reality to emerge.
Exactly.
This story even uses its own brilliant analogy for this. It says life felt like a film played at the right speed for once.
At the right speed for once, that implies that our normal baseline is actually a distortion.
Wow.
We are all rushing, blurring the frames together, completely missing the intricate details of existence. The skies period was essentially a deceleration.
But she doesn't turn into some enlightened monk.
Right. No, and that's what the author does so brilliantly here. They create this stark contrast between Dara's internal, multidimensional experience and her incredibly mundane external reality.
Right, she's not glowing.
No, she's not levitating in her living room.
She's just taking long walks and calling her sister. And I have to say, I love the sister's reaction in the text.
It's so grounded.
It really is. Dara calls her and tries to explain this overwhelming sense of peace, saying, I think I understand what people mean by grace. And her sister, being a perfectly grounded human being, responds with, that's great, Dara. Are you eating?
The sister serves as the absolute anchor to reality there, and Dara is eating. She is functioning perfectly.
Right.
From the outside, there is no dramatic transformation to witness. But internally, she feels like every single moment has an impossible depth to it.
There's a metaphor the author uses there, right?
Yes. The author uses a geometric metaphor that is just spectacular. They write that Dara felt like she was living in a room with one more wall than rooms are supposed to have.
A room with one more wall. That is literally a spatial impossibility. It defies physics.
Which perfectly encapsulates what a transcendent state feels like.
You become aware of a space that logic dictates simply should not exist. But there's a mechanical problem with building a room with an extra wall in your mind.
Gravity always wins.
Always. Eventually, psychological physics demands a correction. The inevitable crash is what anchors this entire narrative.
Although, calling it a crash almost implies too much violence or drama for what actually occurs.
True.
The tragedy of losing inspiration is rarely an explosion. It is a quiet disappearance. It vanishes entirely by stealth.
Isn't the stealth of the loss the cruelest part, though? We tend to really romanticize lost inspiration.
We do. We want it to be a big event.
Exactly. We tell ourselves there will be a grand finale, a dramatic goodbye to our muse, or at least a gradual dimming that we can track and mourn. But Dara didn't get to grieve the loss in real time.
She did not. The timeline the author gives us is merciless. She just woke up on a random Wednesday in October. She made her coffee, looked out the window at the street, and her internal monologue produced a single, devastating word. That's it. The street was just a street again. The coffee was just hot liquid. The extra wall in the room had vanished.
The magic eye poster was just static again.
Precisely. The text notes that the day stretched ahead of her like a corridor with no particular light at the end of it.
That is heartbreaking.
And if we look at the psychological mechanics of this, it is a textbook case of hedonic adaptation.
Right, because you can't stay hypervigilant forever.
Exactly. The human brain cannot sustain the immense metabolic and emotional cost of hypervigilance endlessly, even when that vigilance is producing joy.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. It inevitably normalizes the extra wall. It adapts to the miracle until the miracle becomes the baseline, and the baseline drops right back to ordinary.
Think about this in your own life as you're listening to this. Think about the last time you felt totally in the zone. Maybe intensely focused on a new hobby or deeply connected in the first few months of a new relationship.
You never notice the exact minute it fades.
Never. You probably didn't notice the exact minute that magic faded, did you?
Yeah.
You didn't mark it on a calendar. You just woke up one day and the hobby felt like a chore or the relationship felt routine.
Yeah.
You went from the train window is a kind of prayer to just, It is devastating. And what follows is the desperate, superstitious scramble to get the magic back.
What's fascinating here is that the human reaction to losing a profound state is almost entirely universal. We treat inspiration like a magical spell that requires really precise, rigid ingredients.
Yes, like an incantation.
Right. Dara tries to rewalk the exact same street she walked during the summer. She repeatedly opens the green notebook, hoping the words will act as a trigger.
But reading, I think I heard the color yellow today, in October just leaves her feeling incredibly empty.
It just doesn't work.
Standing still and trying to force the universe to repeat a miracle only results in what the author describes as a bewilderment that shaded slowly into something sadder.
Such a powerful phrase.
She transitions from confusion right into an internal echo chamber of grief. And when your own brain is the faulty instrument, You cannot use it to recalibrate itself. You need an external disruptor.
Which introduces us to Osei.
Yes, Ose.
He is a crucial character who steps into the narrative in January. The narrator provides a really fascinating detail about Osei. He has been kept as a friend for 11 years, specifically for his rare talent of delivering truths as observations rather than accusations.
Honestly, we all need an Ose in our lives. Someone who can state a difficult fact without making it sound like an indictment of your entire character.
They are sitting at a table over food they are both pretending to eat, and Osei simply looks at Dara and observes, "You seem flat."
And of course, Dara immediately gets defensive.
Naturally, she claims she is fine. But Osei's response is an absolute masterclass in holding space. He clarifies, "I didn't say you weren't fine. I said you seem flat."
That distinction is so important. It forces her to finally articulate the loss out loud. She admits to Ose that she had this period last year where everything felt, and she really struggles for the vocabulary here.
She considers the word luminous.
Right, but she rejects it as embarrassing. She
Hmm.
finally settles on the word significant. She confesses that the significance stopped, and she has basically just been sitting around waiting for it to return.
Osei listens, and then he delivers the philosophical core of the entire story.
Yes, this is the best part.
He asks her, what if it did come back and you're just not recognizing it because you're looking for the exact same shape?
Looking for the exact same shape. Here's where it gets really interesting, because that single sentence diagnoses so much of human misery.
It really does.
We constantly confuse the geographic coordinates of an experience with the actual psychological state it produced.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, let's say you take a vacation to Italy.
Okay.
It is the most magical, spontaneous, perfect trip of your life. The food is incredible, the strangers are kind, the weather is flawless. 10 years later, you feel disconnected and burned out. So you try to fix it by recreating that exact trip.
Oh, I see where you're going.
You book the exact same hotels, you go to the same restaurants, you walk the same cobblestone streets.
And it inevitably fails. The magic does not return.
It fails because you are forcing the itinerary to capture the magic, instead of realizing that the underlying mechanism of that joy was your openness. It was your spontaneity.
Yes.
By demanding the experience take the exact same shape as it did 10 years ago, you blind yourself to the joy that might be available to you right now, right in your own neighborhood.
Osei expands on this exact mechanism in the story. He suggests to Dara, what if it's not a state? What if it's more like a direction? And you're in it. You've just been standing still, waiting for the feeling to arrive instead of moving in the direction.
State versus direction. That is huge. A state is static. It is a demand that the universe provide a very specific, recognizable feeling before you are even willing to participate in your own life.
Right, it's very passive.
Exactly. But a direction is dynamic. It is a vector. It implies movement regardless of the emotional weather. You can tell this hits Dara like a ton of bricks because the story notes she thought about it for the rest of the meal and said nothing more.
Which Osei understood meant she was taking it deeply seriously.
So how does this philosophical shift actually change things? Because this brings us back to the present moment of the narrative in April.
Yes, we are back in the hallway. Dara sitting on the floor with that green notebook. We get to witness how Osei's concept of direction alters her physical reality in real time.
She is staring at those strange, profound sentences. Everything is trying to tell me something, and I am finally fluent.
But the magic does not suddenly flood back.
Right. The skies do not rip open. She does not suddenly hear the color yellow again.
The author resists the urge to give us a cheap cinematic resolution here. The skies period remains firmly closed. But there is a subtle, vital shift in her physiology.
It's very quiet.
Extremely quiet. The text describes it not as the full opening of the skies, but more like a single window, cracked. Enough to feel the temperature difference. Enough to know the outside air was still there.
She realizes she had been the person who wrote those words. And she applies Osei's advice. Maybe being fluent in the magic of the world didn't have to feel exactly the same way twice.
Exactly.
Maybe she didn't need to wait for that overwhelming, towering sensation of grace to hit her before she was allowed to engage with reality again.
Dara reaches a profound conclusion about how to operate when you know you are at a deficit. She decides she needs to keep speaking the language of that inspiration, even if she is no longer a native speaker.
But I look at this final scene, and I have to ask, isn't that just settling? Yeah, she decides she will speak the language badly if necessary. Haltingly, with an accent, in the dark with no sense of being heard. Isn't putting on a heavy coat, walking out into a normal street, and accepting a compromised version of the magic just a form of giving up.
Oh, it is the exact opposite of giving up. It is radical humility.
Really? How so?
Because it is incredibly easy to fold your arms and say, well, if I can't have the overwhelming ecstasy of the skies, period, I don't want anything at all. I will just sit in my hallway and be flat.
Oh, I see. Demanding perfection is a form of paralysis.
Precisely. Choosing to speak haltingly with an accent requires immense courage. It is an acknowledgement that the season has passed, but the journey continues anyway. That humility leads directly to the climax of the story.
She puts on her winter coat.
Yeah.
It is the first warm day of April, so it is entirely too hot for a winter coat, but she puts it on anyway.
It feels almost like a protective layer.
Yeah, but also a physical manifestation of carrying the past season with her into the new one. She goes outside, and the street is still just a concrete street. There are no sudden miracles waiting for her on the sidewalk.
But the afternoon light is doing what April light does.
Yeah.
The narrative describes the light as having a particular slant, tentative, and golden that makes even concrete look like it's considering something.
It is not a towering spiritual epiphany.
Yeah.
It is just a moment of gentle, quiet curiosity.
And she walks, and the most crucial detail of the entire ending is what she does not do.
She does not write anything down.
Exactly. During the height of the skies period, she was obsessively filling that green notebook.
Right? She felt this desperate need to capture the fluency, to trap the inspiration in an ink cage so she could prove it actually existed.
But now she just experiences it. The compulsion to document has been completely replaced by this simple willingness to exist within the moment.
Because she is no longer waiting for a static state to overwhelm her.
She is moving in a direction. She is participating in the rhythm of her own life again, even without the extra wall in the room.
So what does this all mean for us? Literature like Off the Skies acts as a mirror for our own psychological patterns. It shows us that the desire to feel significant, to live constantly in the luminous state, is a deeply universal human trait.
We all want the film to play at the right speed.
We do. But it also teaches us that accepting our flat periods, those Wednesday mornings where we look out the window and just think, is a necessary mechanic of living.
It really is.
If we only place value on the towering peaks of inspiration, we will spend the vast majority of our lives resenting the valleys instead of actually learning how to navigate them.
And navigating them requires that willingness to be imperfect, to try to translate the mundane into something even slightly meaningful, even when your brain feels sluggish.
Yeah.
That deliberate effort is what keeps a window cracked open in our chests. It is what keeps the air flowing, ensuring that when the next moment of grace does eventually arrive, we are capable of breathing it in.
To speak the language haltingly with an accent. That is a framework that takes so much pressure off of our daily lives.
Absolutely.
You do not have to be perfectly fluent today. You do not have to hear the color yellow. You just have to try to translate one or two words of the world around you.
It is a profound shift in perspective, moving away from the superstition of recreating past magic and moving toward a quiet, steady engagement with the present tense.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you step away from this and go about the rest of your day.
It's a good one to think about.
If the skies periods of our lives are a complex language, we eventually forget how to speak fluently. What small, everyday things are you currently translating with a heavy accent? Look around you right now at your commute, the cup of coffee on your desk, the concrete street outside your window. What is trying to tell you something, even if you can only understand a single word? Until next time, keep noticing the light.